it's so fun to hear you talk about this, Boo, because there are so many points in common in my own story with yours. Um, Realizing after trying to make it as a professional musician for 13 years and clawing my way up to the bottom of the California music scene, and noticing that I wasn't having any fun and I was a bundle of nerves. And so my trajectory was I went to college at age 34 and ended up getting a degree in neuroscience and studied the neuroscience of music. And it was when I was in graduate school that I started playing again and I started having fun again. And that's actually when my musical career took off because I was no longer the pressure of trying to make a living at it and to be the best was just crippling. Ego crippling and spiritually and psychically crippling because you're never going to be the best. I mean, who's better, Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen? Um, you know, Bela Fleck or Victor Wooten? There is no, the best is meaningless in that context. And yet, as you say, Boo, our ego drives us towards that. And when I started having fun again, other musicians noticed it. And it doesn't matter if I play a wrong note. It's not about that anymore. So now I get to perform with Victor and with Bobby McFerrin and with Sting. And I'm not the best musician. They can have the best they want, but I'm probably having the most fun. And that gets to the topic of Ruth's book of perfectionism. And it's a very nice segue, I think. Perfectionism, of course, I think is a certain amount of perfectionism is necessary for us to improve ourselves and to want to improve ourselves. But too much of it is, to use Boo's word, crippling, or you completely shut down. Either your body shuts down, or your spirit, or your heart shuts down if you're overly perfectionistic. And I think a lot of John Coltrane, who was not the most technically proficient or precise saxophone player, nor was Miles Davis on the trumpet. Their ideas seemed to be so massive that they couldn't squeeze them out through their horns. And the horn would get in the way. And boy, I would rather have that problem, the opposite one, where I have no ideas and I can play those no ideas perfectly. So I think it's the nature of art that we want to have ideas that are bigger than our ability to execute. And then it's the nature of our brains that we are exquisitely sensitive to that gap between what we imagined and what we executed. And being aware of that gap, again, that's important to get better and to keep trying to get your ideas out. Look at Van Gogh. I think he painted sunflowers 7 times. Why? Well, I'm assuming he didn't like the first 6. There was something in his vision that the first 6 didn't get, but then after the 7th sunflower, he stops. Same with his series of irises. You listen to great songwriters and they keep coming back to some of the same ideas, and then eventually they drop them. One example is Paul McCartney, whose father was a British dance hall musician. And so we see Paul playing with trying to write in the British dance hall tradition with When I'm 64 and Honey Pie and Your Mother Should Know. And he keeps coming back to this and trying to nail it. And then finally, on his album Venus and Mars, he writes a song called You Gave Me the Answer. And as soon as I heard it, I went, wow, that is British dance hall music. It's got that funny little voice they had back then that sounds really strained and like telephonic. And he nailed it. And sure enough, he never went back for that again. It was like, okay, he perfected it at least best as good as he could. What I found inspiring in my own music, in recording, I'll separate recording and performance. There's nothing like recording yourself to hear the flaws. And I've recorded probably 50 songs, and I've put out 2 CDs of my own music, and I've played on other people's records. And all I hear are the flaws. I don't hear anything other than the flaws, and it drives me crazy. But the thing that's helped me to get through it and not keep going back over and over and over again with the tweezers is I listen to Steely Dan demos. Now, to me, Steely Dan is the height of exquisitely produced and executed music. Whether you like it or not is beside the point. But every note is in exactly the right place. And Donald Fagen once spent 3 months editing drum machine parts to get them precise to the millisecond, beyond where anybody else in the world could hear it but him, but he. Grammar. And he would go through 5 drummers on a song, to get exactly the right drummer, 5 bass players. But when you listen to the demos, they're terrible. And some of the Beatles demos are terrible. But knowing that they were able to get from that, boy, it sounds like they really can't play, to a beautiful, pristine, exquisite record, makes me think, oh, well, I just got to trust the process. And it's like Boo and editing a book. When I edit a book, my first drafts are terrible. I end up doing 50 or 60 drafts of every book I've published. And I just trust the process. It's never going to be perfect, but it's going to get better if I just keep working at it. Now, and there is some point where you have to say, that's as good as I can do, or it's 97% of the way there, and it's more important for me to get more ideas out that are almost there than fewer ideas that are perfect. The perfectionism is why we don't have more Steely Dan records. I would rather have had a 95% Steely Dan record and an extra one of them than, the small number of 100% Steely Dan records. So we all have to make that choice. What is good enough for me? But I think trying to do your best and listening back and going, yeah, that's about as good as I can get it. That's a healthy way to approach it, and maybe say, well, that's as good as I think I can get it. I'm going to try, maybe I can get 5% better, and you find you bootstrap your way up. I produced 3 Blue Oyster Cult records, and one of the things we did back then was Buck Dharma, the guitarist, would take 10 or 15 solos, and then we'd sit in the control room and we'd pick out the best parts of each one and make a composite track. And then he would go home and learn that and then play 10 more. So he was constantly improving himself based on the bits and pieces of ideas that we strung together. I do the same in my writing. I do the same in my music. Now, to circle back to live performance, as Boo said, who can play in front of 20,000 people and not make a mistake? If you can, you're not taking any risks. And the audience wants you to take risks. And they want you to fail. Livingston Taylor, a wonderful performer and instructor at Berklee College of Music, says, the audience is there to have an emotional experience and to get some kind of transformation in their lives from the performer, to go through some emotional journey with you through the evening. And there's not a whole lot they can give back to you other than applause. And that feels kind of facile to an audience member, Livingston says. And if the performer really moves the audience feels that they have this debt, this asymmetry. What am I giving to the performer? The performer has given so much to me. Livingston says the audience wants nothing more than to forgive you for your humanity, forgive you for your humanness and your flaws. And if you make a mistake up there, and it's an honest mistake, they so want to forgive you. And that's a great gift. And playing with Victor for these last 10 years really schooled me in realizing it's not about me. Nobody is sitting in the audience thinking, oh, he just played an E flat when he meant to play an E. They don't know what I meant to play, and they're not thinking of it in that level. It's not like a jury of critics are sitting out there with the score in front of them and watching whether I hit every note or not. And, the great thing about Victor and again, Bobby McFerrin, there's no judgment on the part of the people on the stage. And so that allows me and the other people on the stage to suspend judgment and just let it happen. And whatever happens, it's fine. And to embrace that and accept it as part of the fun. And yeah, you take risks. And if you think in terms of perfectionism, you're dead.